Welcome, welcome, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Happy Wednesday. We are halfway through this week, getting closer and closer to winter break, which is exciting.
That's right. I don't know how you can't be excited about winter break coming up.
Absolutely. I'm wondering, as we see participants sign on, we'd love for you to, in the chat, share where you're joining from, maybe what your role is within your district. This is one of our favorite things to see. So we'd love for you to put that in.
All right.
Look at Frank in East Meadow. Thanks for joining, Frank. And we have participants from Connecticut.
I see Portugal. Portugal. Thank you for joining. We do have CKLA
coast
users
to coast
in
here.
Portugal.
Coast to coast.
Coast and
California,
coast to coast.
New York.
Continent to continent.
And Louisiana.
Okay.
Absolutely welcome. We are actually in Louisiana today. Massachusetts, all over.
It's exciting to present from Louisiana. We don't normally get to do that. Or I don't. She does. She regularly presents from Louisiana.
That's right.
So for those of you that are on the call that you may have joined before, and Frank may be one of those, you don't normally see Megan and me in the same room. We are so blessed today to be able to present this together. And we thought, why not do it on the same screen?
Absolutely, which leads us to just going through a few housekeeping things before we go ahead and introduce ourselves.
All right. So if you need to access closed captioning, at the bottom of your screen, there's a little button with the CC and you can access it down there. You are going to get a recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to share that out. That will come in an email very shortly, hopefully tomorrow. I don't want to speak for our marketing team, but that will come out soon. And you'll also get an email certificate. So you're going to get a certificate for your attendance today. And we'd love for you to share questions in the chat or use the Q&A. It's all at the bottom of your screen. If you're, I think everybody has been using Zoom. We don't even need to tell you that. But there's a Q&A button, and there's also the ability to use the chat. Our panelists might even be able to respond to you in the chat. So please don't hesitate to use those options because we know you're here to hear from them.
Absolutely. And it's so much fun getting CKLA educators in one place to talk about all the realities that come with Amplify CKLA, making the shift to strong tier 1 instruction. We'll start out by officially introducing ourselves. As you know, this is Dr. Venditti. You want to tell a little bit about yourself?
I'm Karen Venditti. I'm from Northwest Indiana. I was a first grade, fifth grade, middle school language arts, lots of fun moving from those grades. What my most favorite role, though, is now what I'm doing, getting to support teachers and students in the field, utilizing CKLA, getting to meet people like Megan through that role and getting to share with her in Louisiana.
Absolutely. And you know what? I'm actually a classroom teacher from Louisiana, big town of Rain, Louisiana. And I am a former CKLA teacher. So this is always exciting to have these conversations. I work with literacy pilots, especially CKLA, but it's so interesting to see districts really making some changes. Yeah. And that's what today is about. We've selected or we've invited panelists to join us who are actually pretty new to Amplify CKLA, but we did that with great intention or with great intentionality. Oftentimes this shift to this, strong tier 1 instruction can feel overwhelming, or it looks messy. And some things about it look messy, and some things about it initially look fabulous, right? And so we're going to hear all of that today from our new implementers. So I'll let you all introduce yourself. A warm welcome to you, and thank you so much for joining.
Well, thank you. I'm Brady Reinke. I'm the Director of Elementary Teaching and Learning in the school district in New Berlin. New Berlin is a suburban school district. We're a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We've got about 4,000 students. We've got 6 schools. So 2 of our schools are secondary schools, and then the other 4 are elementary. So our elementaries are kind of interesting. They're K6 kindergarten through 6th grade, and then our secondary schools are 7th grade through 12th grade. So it's a little bit different setup. It's kind of nice, but we're not here to talk about that. New Berlin, like I said, we've got about 4,000 students. We are a pretty affluent community. We're a high achieving school district. Our school report card this year for the state gives school report cards. Our ranking was significantly exceeds expectations. So we are a pretty high performing district in the state of Wisconsin. So I'll turn it over to Amy.
And I'm Amy Stempniewski. I am a literacy coach and specialist also here in the school district of New Berlin, and I work with teachers and students in grades kindergarten through 6th grade. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And so now moving to the East Coast, we'll go to you, Bridget.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bridget Vaughan. I am the literacy coordinator K-8 in Quincy, Massachusetts. And my district here sounds pretty different than the district in Wisconsin. We are about 15 minutes south of Boston, Massachusetts. So we're pretty urban. We've got 16 schools in our district. 13 of those have grades K through 5. And 11 are K to 4. And then we have different configurations all over the city. So glad to be here.
Thank you. And Kim, we'll turn it over to you.
Hi, my name is Kim Debello. I am a teacher in Quincy, and I teach at one of our Title I schools, which means 50% of our population is below the poverty level here at our school. So across the board, we have a very diverse population. So we have about 42 languages spoken alone in my school. That doesn't mean that all of them are not native language speakers, but they also have languages at home. A lot of our population have no English at all. So we have a really diverse set of kiddos over here. I teach 1st grade. I've been doing 1st grade over here for about 16 years. I think I'm on my 16th year now. And we have probably close to 500 kids in our K to 4 school. So we have a pretty big group over here.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for sharing that. You guys have done a great job introducing yourselves and really sharing how, like Bridget, you called it out, right? Our district looks very different. And when we think about Amplify CKLA educators, we see a wide range, right? And the most common thing is that we are seeing districts who know that there's always room for improvement, or maybe there's districts who have been underperforming for years, and we have to make some shifts, some instructional changes with our literacy system. And so hearing from educators who have been change leaders or thought leaders during that process is always really valuable, especially if you are someone who's looking to make that shift, or maybe you're in your 1st year too, and you just want to know, like, this is actually what it feels and looks like.
Right.
And so that brings us to this poll question. We want to know about our participants. What is your familiarity with Amplify CKLA? So we'll give you a second to share what your familiarity is with it.
Are you a veteran CKLA educator, or is this your first CKLA experience? Either way, I think you're going to get a lot today.
Absolutely. And just for some context as well, Bridget and Brady, leading their district initiatives, they're actually in their 1st year of implementation, both of them. And so we'll get to hear both sides of, or both of their journeys leading up to that selection of Amplify CKLA, but also the actual implementation.
Exactly.
So as we'll give you about 10 more seconds. Let's see who our panelists are, or who our participants are.
We'll share those results.
Let's see.
We know they're from all over the world, though, so that's pretty neat. And if you're just joining, we'd love for you to share where you're coming from.
All right. I'm wondering what those results show, if we could share
There we
those.
go.
So it looks like the majority of our participants today are actually, this is your 1st experience with CKLA. Close second is districts who are currently reviewing Amplify CKLA. And I know that when my district was reviewing Amplify CKLA, some of the most valuable things we learned were from other educators. And so we have some veteran and some of you who have just started teaching. So a great bunch, and we'll go ahead and get started. Just for context of really, if you're just learning about CKLA today, the focus, in looking at this image here, and Bridget and Brady and Kim and Amy will share that when we think about a literacy system or literacy ecosystem, we know that we have to have these components, right? And that they should all be aligned, especially as we learn about science of reading research. But today is all about tier 1 instruction. What does it look like whenever we're making that shift? So when we talk about Amplify CKLA, it stands for Core Knowledge Language Arts. And this is actually grounded in this research, just to kind of level set with everyone. And Karen, I'll let you tell us about that.
That's good. Well, I want to say first too, it's about prevention, right? When we talk about that system, and if you're looking at an MTSS system, we want to talk, this is a focus on prevention. And if we're going to prevent reading difficulties later, we need to make sure we're taking this research into consideration. So some of you may be very familiar with Philip Goff and William Tumner's work. They called it the simple view of reading. Basically, CKLA was designed around these principles, around this research, that we have a word recognition or a foundational skills development at a certain age in our K-2 buildings and our K-2 instruction, and then language comprehension as well. Now, those things become one when you move into the upper grades, but you need to have both of those things happening simultaneously. And our folks are going to talk all about that as they share.
Yeah. And so when we look at those two main components that we know need we have to develop in kiddos, CKLA's program structure actually reflects that. So we're taking a 2-strand approach in K-2. When you hear Kim maybe talking about the foundational skill strand, what she is talking about is explicit systematic instruction that is developing those word recognition skills, giving kids the ability to decode and encode words effortlessly. So they have that sight recognition, which is going to enable cognitive energy or free up some cognitive energy for comprehension. As we hear Kim maybe share things about the knowledge strand, or Brady and Amy talk about the knowledge topics or those things, what we're referencing is this separate strand that actually the focus is to develop background knowledge starting from kindergarten. Actually, it starts in pre-K.
That's right.
For some of our CKLA educators, but using that systematic approach to build knowledge starting in K-2. And then if we're doing that, we're building that oral language, building that background knowledge, we'll see those strands come together in CKLA's program structure in 3rd through 5th grade. And this is our integrated strand. And Karen, when we think about these upper grades who have been experiencing CKLA, we really, for a few years, we really see just such success as kids move along the reading rope in this integrated strand.
And teachers, how it's really all about helping students unpack complex text and all that goes with that, whether it's foundational skill development continuing or just working through that text.
Yeah. And so I'll go ahead and we'll just jump right in now. So note when we talk about K-2, foundational skills, knowledge, you'll hear those terms throughout this session. But when we talk about 3rd through 5th grade, that's actually all going to be integrated as we're using that rich knowledge or content knowledge to teach all of our ELA standards. So we'll start with hearing about the path. How did your paths begin? And we're going to specifically ask Brady and Bridget to speak to this this experience that led you up to Amplify CKLA. You talked about MTSS, Karen, and what was that data like that actually drove you to that process to say, hey, it's time to make some change? So Bridget, I'll ask that you go first.
Sure. So we've had quite a journey over here in Quincy, and I think, through the pandemic, I really fell down a rabbit hole in the science of reading, and I knew something needed to change here. I had heard a lot for a long time from our teachers that, we weren't meeting the needs of the students, and we needed a core program that was going to try to do that. Although we know that the teachers are the ones who do that. We needed something that would help them and support them while they tried to do that. So we applied for a grant And we received the grant, and then that process led us to putting together a group of pilot teachers, and we piloted other programs as well as CKLA. We had meetings, we had professional development, so that teachers really felt comfortable, materials came, and luckily teachers like Kim were willing to do this work, knowing that the kids needed it. So fast forward, we did, about an 8 to 10 week pilot. This was right around that, from began about February last year and went through the spring. But I'll just pause and say that our plan was to swap. We kind of had narrowed it down to 2 programs, and we were going to swap materials so that the teachers that were the field testers could try out both. And lucky for me, in my role, we never even needed to do that. The teachers that were piloting CKLA were so happy with what their students were able to do that they just asked us, can we just keep this going? We got to keep it going. So then when we came to the spring, and we sat everyone down together, we were all in person, and we had used some curriculum evaluation tools to do this and collected all of our data. It was kind of a pretty clear choice for everyone in the room. It kind of spread like wildfire. It took on a life of its own. And we were thrilled that we had made our decision. And then this year, we began with the digital component, and we are right in the middle of receiving all of our print materials right now. And we've got about half of our teachers already knee deep in everything. And I'm getting daily emails, videos, pictures of, I've been out visiting classrooms, and the kids are loving it. So, so that's where we are live at this moment, right in knee deep in the middle of all of it, which has been pretty awesome.
Yeah, you guys have definitely led into that soft implementation this year. And I love, Bridget, that you shared so many educators who just jumped on board and ran with it because they were ready for that shift. So Brady, tell us about y'all's journey. Y'all's is actually a little different. So it'll be good for
That's
participants
right.
to hear both.
Yeah, so like I said, we are a pretty high achieving school district in the state, and we review we do the typical curriculum review process every 6 years, 7 years, whatever it is. Prior to our ELA adoption, we knew we had to make some changes. We present to our board every year on, our data and things like that. And, our forward results, which are our state assessment, we have between 55 and 60% of our kids proficient or advanced or whatever on our assessment. And our board started asking, like, well, we only have that many kids proficient in reading, and yet we're this significantly exceeds expectations on a report card or whatever. And so they started to kind of push us, like, well, what are we going to do differently? And then our superintendent and our chief academic officer started to kind of push the same thing, because we're really proud of our some of our our mission is to prepare kids for college, career, and life, and we're proud of that. But then we started to read some of the data and research, like 2/3 of kids that aren't reading by 3rd grade, are going to end up, in jail or in poverty when they grow up. And we started saying, like, that's not the graduate we want. So then we really got in digging deep into the whole science of reading, like what's going on with reading. We changed our curriculum review process from a 1-year process for ELA to a 2-year process. Because our superintendent just said, like, this is so important, we need to take the time. And there were days where, like, I would sit in my office for the whole day and just read, like, what's out there, what's going on. And so we got really deep into it. And then we kind of started trickling some science of reading stuff out. We had a team, and we had to bring them along to, like, what are we looking for? Or what should we be looking for? What does the evidence and the research tell us we should be looking for? And the team, started reviewing different resources and things like that. And we went big last year, getting our staff kind of involved. We had Natalie Wexler, do a keynote presentation for us virtually for our staff at a staff meeting or a professional development session. And we had some training on the science of reading, the simple view reading and Scarborough's rope. And then it kind of became, it's like, okay, I think we need to go this direction. We had a little pushback at the school board level because we have to get those things approved. But we were able to, to get them to approve that. And we then just kind of started teaching people about Amplify and CKLA. And that was, so I think it got approved in like April. And then in June and July, we had just some kind of training. Our goal is to have everybody have their materials before they walked out the door in the summer. We achieved that goal, so that was cool. And then we had some training in the summer. And then we had the Amplify 2-day on-site training, which was fantastic. Really, I think our teachers felt pretty prepared to walk into their classrooms in September, and we've been doing it ever since. So it's been pretty fun. Like Bridget said, we're getting all kinds of great stories and pictures and videos and being in classrooms. So it's pretty cool.
I think something that you both brought up, it's a process, and the process isn't the same for everyone. And the longer you can think about that upfront to extend the process, to extend that cycle, because it doesn't just happen overnight. And I think you both experienced that. It might be a shorter pilot if those are some limitations, or it might be a longer pilot, but all the folks that are considering high quality instructional materials really want to participate in that lengthier process to find out what is going to work for them.
Yeah. And Brady, you guys had time, right?
Right.
In Quincy's experience, we didn't have time, right? Like in regards to, we had that really short pilot. And so we saw that Quincy educators jumped right in and really got to experience putting that transfer of that research into instruction. And that's really where the rubber meets the road, right? And so as we think about, some of the things you both shared, different processes, different kind of the way you entered into the process, but also just the need for students, right? What would be high performing, even though the board's saying, hey, we can do better, right? And then a district that is underperforming. And I will say we hear from all types of districts in that situation. And the main thing is that our educators are becoming more aware. And that's just so empowering as an educator, is rising to that call to action. Both of your districts have done that, and that is key. And so as we think about this process though, and really what the preparation was, we kind of heard where you're coming from. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Brady, you guys were coming from Teachers College. And Bridget, where were you all coming from?
A combination of Teachers College, Journeys. I think everything was a supplement, all the above, all sorts of different things. We were trying to patch together so many different things.
All the things. Yeah, so now I'm going to turn it over to Kim and Amy, because this is really where we get to hear about what that actually looks like, right? Like what does it really look like? What were some of the growing pains of that initially? And we're going to ask some really specific questions surrounding those changes. So we'll start with something that we hear from almost every district who's looking to make this shift is we talk a lot about schedules. And so, oftentimes teachers who are experiencing Amplify CKLA, maybe in a pilot, or looking at the material, sometimes we see the minutes and we think, oh my goodness, are we going to have time for this? And if not, what am I going to cut out of this, right? And so, Kim, would you mind talking to some of those initial reactions, but then how the district has worked with you all to set you up for success? And then we'll hear from Amy as well.
Sure. I think that was when we sat on this kind of panel when we were just starting out. I think the initial reaction was, well, how am I going to reach my high kids? How am I going to reach my low kids? Am I going to stop doing centers? What am I going to do about this? Right. So it was all these different things. How are we going to fit this in? Especially with our population. So we were lucky over here at Clifford Marshall. That's where I am right now. And my vice principal was working with Bridget. So she was really on board with this. She really worked through the summertime to really fit a schedule together so that we could do this. Because now this is whole group. Now we haven't taught whole group in years. Like Bridget said, you know, it's funny, I look at that Scarborough's rope all the time, right? So, and I see it all entwined and it looks so pretty. And really it's all frayed and everything's all over the place because we had, like Bridget was just saying, we were using journeys. Then we realized we needed vocabulary. So we were pulling elements of reading, and then we needed comprehension. So we went back to close read. So we had all of these different programs and we were doing all of these different PDs and nothing was meshing together. This Scarborough's rope was not doing what it was supposed to do. So until I started piloting in this, I'm like, this is actually working. Now I understand what the rope is, you know, and I've seen it since I was in school, right? Since everybody has taught that forever, but it never really connected until I feel we started doing this program. Now, a lot of people were kind of upset about how am I going to do this? So what we did was we had an hour in the morning for skills. I have an hour of a win block, which is what I need. And those kids that are my literacy kids go out for what they need. My higher kids stay in and I give them what they need. Then we get back together for another hour and we do our knowledge strand, break for lunch, recess, come back together and teach math. So it's almost like 3-4 really big blocks that starts first thing in the morning. I can go into, you know, we come in at 8:15 in the morning, 8:30 to 9:30, we do skills. My whole class is here. Then we break for snack and recess, 10 to 10:30. 10:30 to 11:15 is my win block. The kids that need to go out, my EL kids go out, my literacy kids go out. The kids that are above benchmark stay with me for that hour. As soon as they come back, we do our knowledge, 11:15 to 12:15, time for lunch, come back, do math. Then we kind of close it up. That's when I fit in my fun read alouds from that, like that 2 to 2:30 time. And we read for fun. We don't read for anything else but enjoyment at that time. I have so many books and we don't need a graphic organizer for everything that we do, right? So that's kind of what my day looks like. And it's nice and it's calm and it looks good and it's just manageable.
Yeah. So Kim, thank you so much for going through really what your breakdown is. That's real life for you. I remember working in Quincy and knowing that schedule didn't look like that last year.
Right.
In fact, I see Bridget's face because the schedule is always a thing. Karen and I will present at Science of Reading conferences. And some of the first questions we'll ask is like, what's your biggest takeaway? And from district administrators, it's like, we got to blow up the schedule.
Right.
We really have to rework the schedule to set our teachers up for success. And that's part of that shift. And so obviously, Bridget, you all worked hard. We hear the success that Kim's having with meeting the needs of her kids, with making sure. One thing that was so important that you said, Kim, is that everyone is in your classroom for tier 1 instruction, right? And that's that grade level instruction piece. And that is a shift for so many districts, is to make sure that we're leaving kids who even receive services in that tier 1 block.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that. Amy and Brady, what about you all? Tell us about your schedule. Have you always had that time?
We really did have most of that time because we were devoting, 45 minutes to an hour to readers workshop, the same to writers workshop, 20 to 25 minutes to a phonics workshop within our kindergarten through 2nd grade classrooms. So that time was there. But going into this new rollout, we were really all on board talking with administrators, everyone together saying, hey, how can we look at schedules to make sure that people feel supported in fitting in these bigger chunks of time, but also knowing that you can be creative with some of the time too. For our kindergarten through 2nd grade, there are very great opportunities to take a break within the knowledge portion. So if you don't have hour chunks of time, you can make that work. Something else that was a huge component and a priority in our district was keeping at least 15 minutes a day for fun choice reading, just like you were talking about, because kids deserve that too. And that was important to everyone. And that was planned from the get-go. So people knew about that. So scheduling didn't seem so problematic, but really just shifting some things around and looking at things more holistically, that things were intertwined within one chunk of time.
Yeah, I think just from what you've both shared about that love of reading, sometimes that comes up with the two-strand approach and the time that it takes on the schedule that we've built in for all of the pieces, all of that comprehensive nature of CKLA. But we're still fostering, when you can read, you love to read. And we want to make sure kids are exposed to the topics that they can then find texts on, and they're reading about these wonderful things that they may never have been exposed to before. And that's another thing. And that came up a little bit in chat too, when we talk about the content that they're going to be addressing. And so I'd love to hear from you about how you've approached that integration with that. Or that kind of also leads to one of the challenges we sometimes have with the different topics and some things that you might have heard, or some things that, you've encountered from, whether it's parents, community members, classroom teachers. We'd love to hear those types of conversations that you're having. Brady, maybe you want to start with that.
Yeah. So, one of the most interesting things that I've learned, or we're learning, or we're observing throughout this process, is sometimes we place expectations or thoughts about kids on kids as adults that aren't really true of kids. So for instance, when we read, I read all the units. That's just my job. That's what I do when we're reviewing. And, you're reading through them and you're thinking, oh my gosh, like first graders learning about ancient Asian civilizations. That's going to be, and I think our teachers kind of were like that too. And then they did it, and our kids were all like so unbelievably engaged in those concepts that our teachers didn't even, were like, oh my gosh, they are. As far as like we heard a lot of like, oh, they're going to sit for a long time and they're going to, and it's like, well, not really. Two things. Yeah, they can sit a lot longer when they're engaged and really interested in something than they can, when they're not. And so we're starting to like some things that we assumed are not true. We're learning, and I think the other really cool thing is just like we're hearing over and over that the discussions kids are having are like crazy, like unbelievable, and they're using the vocabulary. And even it's like I have a son who's in fourth grade in one of our schools, and my daughter was going to I had to take her to get her like sixth grade shots or whatever. I can't remember what shot it was, but she of course was freaking out, and he was sitting in the back seat listening to it, and he finally goes to her, well, at least you're not getting a spinal tap, because the needles for that were like this long. And of course that didn't give her any comfort, but at the same time it showed me like we're like 2 weeks into this new resource, and my son's already talking as a fourth grader about needles from spinal taps and things like that, which is like I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. So I don't know, Amy, if you have anything else to add on that.
I just think in general, like anything you've observed, or like all teachers will say, like kids are talking about this. They're from playing something at recess that is thematic from the knowledge they're gaining within that portion of the day, to talking more about it, to requesting things, to read more about it, asking parents to look things up, telling their caregivers, hey, did you know this? Let me show you this. Those stories are endless, and it's pretty cool to hear those stories and see that when you see kids in action. And again, absolutely using that vocabulary, sharing their thoughts and ideas from little on, and just the enthusiasm and overall engagement is really quite remarkable. It's awesome to see.
Yeah. So, and Bridget, I know that doing classroom walkthroughs with you, we heard kids and their responses. We also just heard from Brady and Amy about teacher response to this rich content knowledge that may be a little unfamiliar, maybe a little bring up some feelings of discomfort initially. And we heard some student response. But Bridget, what was it like for Quincy educators, especially during that pilot?
So these were teachers during the pilot that were willing to do this work. They knew that it would be different. But I think initially, I see some of the comments in the chat too. Initially, it was like, well, okay, it was kind of like this way of thinking of small group versus whole group, and that they're kind of very two distinct things, or we just read aloud and students don't read independently. And like, those are separate things, but that once you start, it's definitely a shift. And I can say that on average, after about a week or two, and with the professional development, once people jumped in, there was kind of like no looking back. It was pretty easy to just kind of keep moving forward. But what, and then those things like, small group versus whole group, those were not separate anymore. Because, when you see a lesson plan and it says whole group, that doesn't mean necessarily that, a teacher standing in front of the classroom and students are just listening and behaving and not interacting. In fact, from the lessons that I've seen, it's almost like not even a minute goes by where the kids are talking and discussing and doing turn and talks or acting things out. I just saw, I know this is going to sound wild, but I saw an oral presentation by 3 kindergarten students on the 3 different systems of the body. And they had drawings of the skeletal system, the digestive system, and the muscular system. And they were talking about, pointing out things with a pointer, that esophagus, femur, and, they're talking over each other and it's a little bit messy. But it was incredible, the vocabulary they were using. And so those kinds of things, like those topics, like the War of 1812 in grade 2 or geology in grade 4, the teachers definitely had some anxiety about thinking that I have to know all of this. But once you saw the layout of the lessons plans and started to implement them, you don't have to know all of it. It's kind of like laid out for you in a nice way, so that you're asking the questions and the students are responding. And then as far as, I saw in the chat about the reading aloud and not, the thing that I love personally is that, first of all, having all of the kids in the instruction is access and equity to the core, to tier 1, which is something that we had to work on in Quincy. So everybody is there. And then also the students in the younger grades never have to read text with skills that they haven't been taught, right? So they're exposed to this complex text, but they're not reading the complex text until and when they're ready to do it, when it becomes integrated in grade 3. Although they're exposed to the complex text the entire time from kindergarten up. So.
Well, and Bridget, what you just said is so important for us to clarify. We saw that question come up, right? When are kids going to have complex text? And, in K-2, what we know about how the brain learns how to read, we have to take that 2-strain approach. We can't wait until kids are in 3rd grade to begin utilizing complex text. In fact, in the knowledge strand, teachers are reading text aloud that are above grade level. We're taking that lifted decoding off. But what you said about text, the student reader text in CKLA, that happens in the skill strand in K-2, right? And so we are not asking students to apply skills that we haven't explicitly taught. And that is a matter of equity, right? This is a grade level text. They've received this high quality, explicit systematic instruction, and now they get to apply it in their student readers.
And you also mentioned the vocabulary. So that vocabulary that they're hearing read aloud or whether they're reading it, that comes out in their everyday discussions. And it's wild. Brady, you mentioned also that we make assumptions about kids. That's one of the assumptions we make about kids, that the vocabulary is going to be too hard. I've heard that, I've heard that from teachers. It's too hard. Kids can use it. It's about, inputs and outputs, whatever they're receiving, they can share back. And, equity, everybody gets access to that. Kim, you mentioned earlier that you have multiple languages, and I know that your schools have teachers with many languages spoken. I'd love to hear how that relates to that, because sometimes teachers push back a little bit about that. It's going to be too hard. My kids aren't going to be able to process.
They won't be able to
access.
access
Right,
it. How do we get
exactly.
those students underperform, or, kids who are initially at risk, especially in this first year of implementation, kids who are not native English speakers, right?
Exactly.
How do we really give them access to this high quality tier 1 instruction?
And I know you've got examples, and I think you've got some people in your building that you might have shared an example about as well.
Yep. Actually, so I feel like it's more inclusive, this program is, because number one, all of the kids, even my well below kids, are so much more engaged in first grade, even in the skills, not just the knowledge, but in the skills strand. The reader, the decodable reader that we're using is similar to a chapter book, right? So and the one that I'm on now is about Gran, and she travels, of different parts of the world. And she has all these adventures. Well, a lot of these kids have been in different parts of the world. I'm the one who hasn't, like they have. So when they say, oh, England, we're in England now. Oh, I was there. We talk about Big Ben is in one of our decodable readers. She said, I took a picture with Big Ben. Can I bring it in? Yes, of course you can. I've had all of these kids, like all of a sudden you would have these moments and you would see their eyes light up, and then they would say, well, I know where that is, so that was really interesting. And that brought a lot to the table for them, because then they could have those conversations, and then they kind of grew this confidence that they never had before either. So even in these, not just the knowledge, but even the skills, right? Teaching the phonics through these phonics readers that are engaging for them. They're not the decodables that we used to use, like pat sat on a mat, that kind of thing. So we teach short A for a whole week and beat that to death, so these skills and these readers are so much more engaging. And we teach a couple of phonetic skills within that, and they're getting it. They get it. We're not just going to say, well, I'm going to teach, the digraph TH for a whole week. How are they going to get it if I don't teach it for a full week and then do a cut and paste every day? And then, it's so much better and so much more useful the way this whole phonics is presented. And I started to look at that science of reading before I was going to pilot this, because for me, the centers weren't working. I mean, I don't know, kudos to anybody who, where the centers work, but I was so tired of making all these things and laminating, and then we can't find this, and little Johnny over here has to go to the bathroom, and these two are arguing. It didn't work for me. So I really needed to pull back something where we could, everybody is learning and learning from each other. So if we just separate these kids, then they're not learning from each other, are they? Right? I'm pulling this little group, I'm pulling this little group, and they're not talking to everybody in the classroom. And even the shy ones who kind of sit back a little bit, they're listening. So, you do that, so what do you think over there? And all of a sudden she's answering. I'm like, this is great. Okay. And even the high ones, like my high kids, I always realize are word readers. They're just getting through it. The comprehension wasn't there. So in my class right now, I have 9 above benchmark. I have 9 well below benchmark, and I have 1 at benchmark. This was in the beginning of the year in September. So I thought, wow, how is this going to work? Last year I piloted, it was a little different. This year is like half and half. And it's excellent. It's great. I mean, everything is going really well. Everybody's making progress at, whether it's in comprehension, whether it's in their phonemic awareness, whether it's in their phonics skills, even their writing, because we're not only decoding, we're encoding, we're spelling, that kind of thing. And the knowledge strand, which was interesting too, because those are meatier topics. And one like ancient civilizations, I did that last year. I'm not on that yet, but I had to kind of sneak around on your website, and I'm like, where's the video? I have to learn how to say these words. I don't know. I don't know about this, I don't know where I was when I was being taught about the Incas and the Aztecs, and I have no idea. I kind of blanked it out. And then when I went back and I was listening to the video, I'm like, all right, I can do this. And then when I did it, they loved it. That was almost one of their favorite strands, which was surprising to me, I guess. And parents would come in for report card conferences. And this is the first time ever parents were like, what are you teaching in here? They come home every day and they're talking. They can't stop talking about this stuff, and they're using these words, and they say, I don't even use these words when I'm a medical professional, like this kind of thing. And it was so funny because they could not get over how talkative their kids were at home. And it wasn't just like, oh, what'd you do in school today? Oh, nothing, I went to gym. They really wanted to tell the stories and talk about what they learned. So that was really enlightening, that more than almost all of my parents came in and wanted to discuss what we were teaching.
Best parent, best teacher ever. I remember getting the same thing. I was like,
excellent.
yes, I know.
Yeah.
And Brady even said, his own child is coming home and talking about spinal taps, right? Because of Amplify CKLA. But we got a question in the chat that I'm really excited to turn over to Brady and Amy. You guys have really ran with the celebrations aspect of this. Coming from a higher performing district, I'm sure that this really is something that you'll see with really having to meet the needs of kids who are reading a grade level above or 2 grade levels above. Brady, one thing you shared with us in our conversation with you is, kids in your district, already have been exposed to a lot of the authentic text that we see in some other curriculums and things like that, right? So it's really not that there's not that moment for growth or learning. But I'm wondering, how are your teachers really using Amplify CKLA and then also meeting the needs of kids in K-2 who are reading beyond grade level or above grade level?
Certainly. A couple cool things that we're seeing, right? I think, like I talked about before, we make assumptions about kids sometimes, and I think we have to remember that even though a kid is reading or appears to be reading in 1st grade or kindergarten or 2nd grade, it's not, you can make the assumption that they know everything, but until it's a hard assumption to make. I think I shared with you guys, again, my 6th grade daughter is that same thing. Like, she came into kindergarten, my little girl came into kindergarten as a sweet little girl that, quite honestly could memorize most of the words in books and could identify some of the words and loved reading. And we were all excited as parents, and her teachers, were all excited and things like that. And then now she's in 6th grade, and to be honest, she struggles with reading. And it's because as a system, we missed, I truly believe we missed some of it. It's nobody's fault. We just, except for mine, maybe. We missed some of her, struggles or some of the holes that she had because she was a reader early on. So, really within our district, and we actually just had that exact same question. We have a district here visiting us today. And our kindergarten teacher said, my kids do it. And she's like, I find little things to continue to challenge them. And they come up with things that actually challenge themselves. And then the knowledge portion is like fantastic for our higher achieving students, or because then teachers have natural ways to get kids interested, or have push them further in things, or hey, we could read about this or read about that. So I think it kind of works together like that. And then also I saw in the chat, I just want to comment on really quick, if you don't mind. Somebody talked about, well, how do you find ways to make things engaging, or I can't remember exactly what they asked. But truthfully, everybody, because I read the Facebook pages too, right? People are like, oh, this is a scripted program, and it's not and it doesn't have to be. It can be you can follow or you can say, there's an art of teaching, and how do you engage kids, or how do you keep kids engaged? That's your art of teaching. And we've said to our teachers, hey, we're gonna stick to the science part of teaching, the part that everybody else or that CKLA is laying out, but there's a certain art to keeping kids engaged and doing things, and that's, every teacher does it a little bit differently. So there's not one way, but our teachers are always looking for ways to meet their kids where they're at and move them forward. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, and I think someone in the chat just responded really well. In fact, Brady, kind of to sum up or synthesize what you were saying about, even your daughter's experience. Oftentimes in those earlier grades, we think that kids who can memorize words quicker, they become our word callers. We assume that they have those phonemic awareness skills that actually are going to help or lay the foundation for reading reading and spelling multi-syllabic words down the road, right? And if we take that for granted and we miss the mark, then we see those deficiencies present themselves later on down the road, when it is a lot harder to kind of close those gaps because teachers in upper grades aren't as familiar with how to do that. The other thing that I really want to just jump on too is you know, how do we meet the needs of gifted learners or advanced learners, or, well, those K-2 kids, they still need to be explicitly taught those skills, but also writing, right? When we think about the way that they're writing, that's something that they're doing even with their connected text. That has to be explicitly taught. So even my gifted learners needed that writing. And, you know, Karen, Brady shared something with us about that engagement piece that he has to share with our audience.
Definitely. And Brady, we're going to go back to that grade 2 Greek gods unit that you mentioned. And I'd love to, and teachers do creative things, but this was really the kids
Ownership.
doing some, creative things. So I'd love for you to share that example.
Yeah, so, well, you can, all right?
It's fine. We would just like to say in general, like the teachers across our district have really, just taken hold of celebrating and taking all the knowledge and finding amazing ways to culminate a unit to bring all that excitement and engagement together. And they have done fascinating, incredible things. We could list off so many. There was a second grade classroom where they were creating trading cards of Greek gods and took it a step further and created a game out of it. You know, how much value would be on these cards and how they applied and elaborately planned this game, which we were all just like, this is incredible.
Yeah, Amy called me on that one. I was driving home and she called and was telling me about like, oh yeah, these kids, like they made this Greek god trading card game. I'm like, yeah, okay. That's cool. You know, and then she's like, yeah, they made this game. And then I was like, she hung up and I kept driving. And then I was like, oh my gosh, like this is so incredible that these kids are like, they're making like their own game out of this. And then they're placing value on the Greek gods they've learned about and trading it. And I was like, holy cow, that's crazy. And we've told our teachers like, here's the thing that I think we have to remember sometimes with elementary, like kids are, the majority of our kids are going to learn how to read and write. 20 years from now, they're not going to remember how they did, but thank God that they're able to do it. But when they look back at their elementary school experience, like what are the memories that they look back on? And it's those fun things that our teachers created. So we're challenging our teachers, like make some memories this year too. And like Amy said, we're having so many cool things,
They are incredible. We have so many celebrations. In fact, we created a platform for all of the teachers to share all their different culminating projects and celebrations for each of the units. So across our district, people could see it in addition to just celebrating all of the creativity and amazing things that are happening. It's awesome.
Yeah. And so this is really exciting because we hear from educators, and I'm sure we kind of touched on it briefly, where teachers might initially look at the topics, the knowledge-rich topics or knowledge domains, and think, oh, I don't know why kids would need to learn this. Not my kids. They won't be able to use this vocabulary, or this content is not appropriate. These topics are not appropriate. One thing Amy and Brady, you shared with us is just, you just talked about the celebratory aspect of Amplify CKLA, but how did you guys really get your teachers over that hump to be able to embrace the content, especially initially after maybe looking at some domains and thinking, we need to do a little more, a deeper dive into these. What are the systems you put in place, or that the supports you've put in place to make sure teachers are able to even get to that point of celebrating a domain they've taught?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is just to understand it. And our principals have been great. I mean, our teachers have been amazing. They always are. Every teacher in our district is phenomenal.
Very much.
Our principals, we asked them to set aside at least one of their staff meetings a month where our teachers just sit and read. That's all they do. They just they bring their books, they sit and read. It's like a reading morning. And so like we knew from like maybe our old resource or whatever that our teachers weren't always reading the units. So we I think that's empowered some of that. And then think it's just celebrating, and quite honestly, I think sometimes just creating a little competition, like, post something on Facebook and everybody else sees it, and then, the kindergarten teachers at one of our buildings are like, oh my gosh, like they did that, let's talk to them and let's do that. And then there's this like snowballing competition. Like we had the houses that it was like, what was that, kindergarten?
Mhm.
And they were building these houses like from the Big Bad Wolf and the Three Little Pigs. And so like one of our schools is like the Coyotes is their mascot. So like they like dressed like somebody put the coyote mascot on and had like a leaf blower and was blowing all these houses all over the playground and stuff. And then, so then those kind of things just kind of trickled, through, and it just creates that excitement for our kids too.
But I think as well, like, and just a shout out to our teachers, they're very reflective and they're very careful in what they're doing to kind of analyze and think about what things look like and how it might be different and within their own growth or understanding. And they ask amazing, thoughtful questions. And we work together as a team to figure things out. We have a great literacy team that I work with that we meet with teachers every other week just to really lay out like what is coming, what are the nuts and bolts, what is important. So we're all on the same page and giving people a platform just to check in, kind of a temperature check. How are things going? What questions do you have? And our staff just do a great job of being honest and reflective and celebrating, in addition to just asking, like I said, those questions to move forward with things that might be difficult at the time, or we might need to figure out and problem solve. And that's a great cohesive piece that it's helping us to grow within building this new rollout.
Yeah, it's really important to, I would say, for any district in the work that I witness day to day from districts, both of your districts and many other districts who are doing this work. Whenever we hear challenges from teachers, oftentimes it kind of comes back to revamping the system that has been put in place over the past couple decades. And we try to operate from that place with Amplify CKLA. We really kind of see those things come to surface of the changes that need to be made to really support teachers in that. And we hear that support that you all are doing. And Bridget, you guys have done just such a lovely job with the support, with scheduling, with giving your teachers access before we, to Amplify CKLA before we officially start that implementation. And they have just run with that. And that's so exciting. But, in thinking about, we talked about controversial content or some of those maybe topics that would cause some discomfort and how we move to that celebratory phase and really just like giving full transparency and also supporting teachers in that. What are these areas? But there's also this aspect, Kim kind of touched on it, and Bridget, I'm going to ask you this question specifically in your role. Kim mentioned centers or workshop, that model, that instructional model really gets revamped, I will say, with Amplify CKLA. And what has that been like for Quincy educators who have begun to teach Amplify CKLA, or maybe pilot educators? When we think about making that instructional shift, that management really kind of feels a little uncomfortable, especially when we're trying to hang on to the other 8 things we've been trying to piece together. So what would be your advice in the work that Quincy's done to let go of some of those old practices, but really to work through some of those challenges?
Sure. So after we did our pilot, we actually have now a CKLA council that Kim is a part of. And so that brought together all of members, grade level teachers from all of our schools. And we meet once a month and we have different topics and we talk about different things and what's happening at your school. So one of the things, if we're talking about centers or different materials, one of the things that I always was hearing was like, well, we're just not consistent here. We have so many schools and everybody's doing different things. So this has, brought consistency. Having this program has brought consistency. But it's also building capacity within the buildings, so I heard Brady mention about like there's a little competition. We have certain schools that have kind of really jumped in, and maybe the classroom next to you, your partner wasn't doing it, but now they've jumped in. And so having this council has really built capacity and more community and consistency. And that's somewhere where I think some of those things like centers are talked about. One of the other things that we did either as a district or within a building to build capacity is having these sort of little mini curriculum showcases where teachers go and visit other classrooms and they see how it's done. So it's one thing to just say it, but then when they see it and they see that, you know, whole group is not what you think whole group is. Being interactive and collaborative with your students does not necessarily mean they all have to be at different centers rotating every 15 minutes. There's a very different way to look at it. And so until you see it, and, you know, we've had challenges with, you know, substitute coverage and all of this, but it takes time. And as long as you're, you know, you're patient with people and you're listening, it's just builds. And once they try it, like I said, you know, once they're kind of like looking at materials and poking around, they don't really look back. We haven't had anyone. And if they have, then that might be a place where, like, you know, if someone's emailing me, I might just go out and visit the class and see what's happening. And then, you know, we talk through it a little bit. And that helps to build a little more. And then, you know, that person actually just wrote me an email last week and said, you know, 21 students, 9 languages. And she just, this was like 7:30 on a Friday night. And she said, I know I shouldn't be emailing you, but teachers are suckers for this stuff. And she just wrote this whole thing that she is just, and she admittedly was very wary and skeptical of the process.
Bridget, this is a perfect place to end, because I mean, you've shared that it's about seeing other teachers, collaborating with other teachers. Both of your districts have been so open to others coming to visit or chat via Zoom to have that collaborative spirit. And that's what we always recommend, that go visit it. And I'm going to say, both of you, Megan and I, are going to show up in both of your districts one of these days together, so that we can see this in action. And we hope others reach out to you as well. I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't like offer your service, but they would love to see it in action with Kim and Amy and just all your teachers and everything that's happening. This is, I know we're at the end of time. We could go on for another hour, I'm sure.
Yeah,
But
we could. And, you know, we heard you say, trust the process, or trust the, you know, something Brady shared with us is trust the spiral, not teaching to mastery. Right. And that's a shift, but trust the spiral of these skills being built, these knowledge domains, this vocabulary being built. But I think also we have to trust ourselves as educators in that vulnerable place too. And it seems like that has been the work that has empowered educators to really leap into CKLA within in both of your districts. So when we think about moving forward, we are going to sign off. This has been a lovely conversation.
Perfect.
It is my wish that, you know, we have to definitely show back up again.
That's right.
And definitely see this in action. But if you are on this webinar and you have a district nearby, go and visit. Allow teachers into other teachers' classrooms to see this really happening. It's a magical experience and it builds capacity for everyone.
Yeah. And we want to thank our panelists today for sharing such wonderful stories and great advice. And we hope to see you again soon on a visit to your district, to your schools.
Absolutely. So if you want to watch past webinars, here we are. You can access the website here at the top. And we hope that you all have a great afternoon, and we look forward to hearing from anyone who is interested in learning more about Amplify CKLA.
Happy winter, everyone.
Have a good one.